Good morning on this Sunday, December 24th. A Merry Christmas Eve and welcome to the Georgia Gang. A vote by the State Elections Board to investigate Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger over the 2020 election falls short. Also, Governor Brian Kemp gives all state employees, including teachers, a $1,000 bonus. And Rudy Giuliani files for bankruptcy just days after he's ordered to pay almost $150 million to two former Fulton County elections workers. Kathy, Phil, Theron, and Martha are all here. The debate and discussion begin right now.
From the Fox 5 studios, the Georgia Gang starts now.
The Georgia State Elections Board met this week to hear several cases surrounding the 2020 election. One of the cases brought up is whether the board has the authority to investigate Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger. Some Republican Party activists want to investigate Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger for what they claim are election code violations. At a news conference, those critics demanded an investigation into Raffensperger for what they claim are elections errors, violation of election laws, and cover-up of key findings.
We had people come from all over the state. They're demanding accountability of the state election board and also of the Secretary of State. The Secretary of State has violated Georgia law by not following Georgia code to make sure that our elections are secure and transparent and accurate.
The critics claim they have found errors with thousands of votes in the 2020 election in Fulton County. But the election board deadlocked on a 2-2 vote about investigating Raffensperger, and that's short of the majority vote they needed. For months, the Secretary of State's office has maintained their own investigation into the 2020 election has shown no evidence of thousands of illegal votes in Fulton County. As this group claims, the GBI also found no evidence of wrongdoing. Martha, to you first this week. Several activists showed up demanding this investigation into Secretary Raffensperger, but it's been 3 years and they're still looking back. Is this going to help the Republicans going forward?
Well, I think there was this story that got circulated, ironically, on the same day that the Giuliani case was being announced, about 17,000 votes that had been found. It was in a lot of very unreliable news sources and really was a part of this thing where any vote can be challenged. Personally, I don't think this helps. I don't think that this is something that we need to go forward on. And really, the credibility of the claims just really weren't there. So it was a 2-2 vote. It doesn't end up with an investigation of Raffensperger, and I do think that we need to go forward instead of backward.
Well, Theron, even Governor Kemp tweeted, for nearly 3 years now, anyone with evidence of fraud has failed to come forward under oath and prove anything in a court of law.
Yeah, I mean, the governor has said this, the president of the United States, other Republicans have joined the governor saying, hey, we need to move on. And also the governor has said, hey, if we're talking about 2020 and 2024, then Republicans are not going to have a good shot at winning Georgia and other states. And so I think there are a lot of Republicans who want to move on from this. But look, these activists, I mean, they showed up. It wasn't just a few people. We can get into the validity of the claims and whether it makes sense or not. But ultimately, I said it last week, Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger is a national Secretary of State. And you see how all of a sudden all these questions that are being raised from the right, and I'm sure there's going to be some stuff from the left. And so as he goes into the next year's legislative session, I'll be very interested to see what changes will he propose other than what some of the concerns that people express.
Phil.
Well, number one, I'm disappointed with the State Elections Board because we do have to look back and look forward at the same time with regard to election security. For example, the Election Board punted on memory cards, which are just as important as the physical ballot. State law says they should be retained for 24 months. They didn't even follow state law. I could go on. Here's some breaking news that I found out just before we taped the show. Remember federal judge Amy Totenberg? And remember, we've got a trial coming up in January. What's the trial about? It's about election security. The judge ripped apart Raffensperger, didn't like the QR codes, didn't like the fact that these 29 cybersecurity experts I think, headed by a Democrat, the Haldeman report, actually, the guy was a Democrat. Get this, the state, using our taxpayers' money, doesn't want Raffensperger to testify next month. What? The governor and Raffensperger saying we're secure. They've been going all around the state, and yet Raffensperger can't spend 75 minutes to testify, defying Judge Totenberg's order. It's incredible.
Kathy, you bring us a different perspective on this. What are your thoughts on how this is all shaking out? I mean, especially with your experience with the Fulton County elections.
Well, you know, I've spent 2.5 years as the Fulton County Election Board chair and really learned a lot about elections. And one of the things that we have to understand, and I'll be glad to be on the show in the coming year to keep re-emphasizing this, is that elections have lots and lots of redundancy. So even if there's a problem, if you can pinpoint the problem, then you can accurately determine what's going on. Now, we've had, you know, 3 investigations in Fulton County that have said there's no problem. These stories just keep coming and coming. But I am most concerned that the governor hasn't appointed an additional member of the state election board, so we have an uneven number and we can settle these votes once and for all.
That's a good point. All right, well, moving on. This week, a divided Colorado Supreme Court on Tuesday declared former President Donald Trump ineligible for the White House under the U.S. Constitution's insurrection clause and removed him from the state's presidential primary ballot. Also this week, a judge here in Georgia heard arguments but didn't roll Monday on a long-shot attempt to disqualify Georgia Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones from holding office because of Jones's participation as an elector for Donald Trump in 2020. Phil, your thoughts on these cases? Are they going anywhere? I
don't think so. Just to take the Colorado case first, and I know I always thought Donald Trump was a little overdramatic when he called some of these judges deranged. I actually am agreeing with him now. I think the 4 Colorado justices were completely deranged. The former president didn't get any due process. They're legal experts, as we all know, ranging the political spectrum, saying that the man's never been convicted of anything. In fact, he was acquitted by the U.S. Senate, if you remember, of the so-called phony insurrection charge. So I hope the Supreme Court quickly knocks this down. I don't see where this impacts Georgia much at all.
Kathy?
Well, they do need to do this very, very quickly. And again, back to the elections issue, just from a process point of view, election officials really need time to be able to prepare for major elections like this, and to have things hanging in the balance right up to the 11th hour is when you start to see errors happen because people are trying to move quickly through complex processes.
So in Colorado, for example, it looks like the GOP in Colorado is going to go to a caucus because they have that option. They're like Virginia. They're like a couple of other states where they can go either way. So the former president is going to be included in the mix in Colorado regardless of what happens. But I do think what's interesting about the Colorado decision, while I think it's wrong, and I think that the language in the 14th Amendment needs to be clarified because it doesn't mention the president in the language. It only mentions Congress and other elected officials. I think what's interesting is because they quoted Neil Gorsuch, who's one of the Supreme Court justices, there's going to be some move to make him recuse himself. I don't think it'll change the ultimate thing that happens because I think that the Supreme Court is going to say that no, that he hasn't been charged with insurrection, he hasn't been convicted of insurrection, and I do think it has been sad that from the beginning, especially Democrats have used this term insurrection because it was a riot on January 6th. It was not an insurrection. Everything happened on time. The Constitution was fulfilled and nothing was delayed. So I do think that Colorado made a big mistake here. There are 13 states that are going to be looking at this too, so it needs to be a quick decision, to Kathy's point.
Theron is shaking his head.
No, I mean, look, there was an insurrection that happened. And whether or not the former president of the United States of America, which he's been investigated, incited that insurrection, that's yet to be, sort of looked at. But this is the first time I think ever in our U.S. history that the 14th Amendment has been basically enacted to basically remove someone from the ballot. And so whether it's upheld, I agree with Kathy and Martha that it needs to move fast. But will this happen in Georgia? A state official like Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones, maybe, maybe not, because he hasn't gone as far as some of the other people here. But ultimately, let's not forget what happened. I mean, there was an insurrection, and this is the 14th Amendment that's been enacted. It probably will get appealed, and we'll be talking about this for months to come.
It was a riot that went out of control.
It'll go up to the U.S. Supreme Court. But what about Lieutenant Governor Jones in this case? Is it far-fetched?
Well, yeah, it is far-fetched. I mean, you still have protected speech. You can question an election. You can be an elector. That's what the whole court case is about. And so I don't see any application of the 14th Amendment.
Well, there have been duplicate electors in elections before.
Well, sure.
It just didn't get as much process.
Sure.
I mean, it didn't get as much attention as this one did. There has been in other elections, I think.
Well, I was a Biden elector, and I got to tell you, when I was at the Capitol that day to cast my vote for the President of the United States, we knew there were people somewhere in the Capitol doing something that was very confusing to us because it had never happened before.
They were hiding, remember?
They were hiding, and we didn't know where they were.
They were getting legal advice to have a elector slate, just like the Democrats did in Hawaii legally in 1960.
Well, they need to get a little bit better advice, and clearly some of the lawyers that we're seeing now in the courts are not giving very good advice. So,
all right, guys, we'll leave it there. Coming up, Governor Brian Kemp gives all state employees, including teachers, a $1,000 bonus. We'll discuss next.
Have a question or comment for the Georgia Gang? Email them at georgiagang@foxtv.com.
Just in time for Christmas, Governor Brian Kemp is giving all state employees, including teachers, a $1,000 bonus, but Atlanta Public Schools was feeling a little grinchy, Kathy. They wanted to say, you know what? No, you've already been paid that. But it looks like they're reversing course.
well, I don't know that you set that up for me very nicely, I have to say. But, look, teachers deserve all the money they can possibly get. School systems need all the support they can possibly get. It would have been great if the governor had made that announcement just a little bit earlier so that school systems could have planned their year-end giving in a way that, met their budget. But, hey, everybody, Happy New Year.
I feel like you got the budget surplus.
Well, yeah, no, I think it's great. I think teachers do deserve that plug. And, I know we're going to talk probably about the Atlanta public school system, but I think if the money's there, go for it.
Theron, what did you think? The APS came out and said, you know what, you all already got a $1,000 bonus, and that's what this is. And they were like, no, this is in addition to the $1,000 bonus.
I think that they came out and they wanted more clarity. But look, you can't be against the governor or anybody, as we've said, that is trying to give money to, I believe, the most noble job one can have, and that is being a teacher. And so APS.
And all state employees. We'll have to say all state employees.
And then I was going to say, then to give it to all state employees, and the timing of it, Senator Brian Kemp said, hey, let me make sure. But to be fair to the governor, look, he's done this before. He's given out money. He's given money back. I agree with Kathy. I think a little sooner would have been better. But ultimately, look, he has doubled down on his campaign promise. He's been very, very committed to making sure that he puts his money where his mouth is when this comes to supporting state employees, but particularly teachers.
But, can I just say, bonuses are one thing, but if you're not actually raising people's salaries year over year over year, it doesn't accumulate in the lifetime of somebody's career. And I think that's something that we really have to debate in the budget at the state level.
The governor has
done
has
given them raises.
But I know, but they still need to do more because we've had so many years where that's not happening.
Well, and they'll be talking about TRS funding and things like that in the next legislative session, and this is a part of the fact we have this big surplus, and we're going to have lots of things that we're going to be talking about, whether it's the bridge in Savannah, whether it's other things related to the port, all of that sort of thing. So there's a lot of money out there, and as Terry England famously said, it's harder to say no when you got a lot of money than when you don't have much.
True. Well, this week, Georgia Governor Brian Kemp also gave a preview of one of his key legislative priorities for 2024, school safety. He announced plans to include more than $100 million in the budget. That comes down to about $45,000 to every public school in the state to be spent on security upgrades and extra law enforcement presence. Martha, is this enough?
Well, it's great to see Senator Bo Hatchett in that clip because he and I had a class together when I went back to school and he was in law school. So it's great to see him there. Is it enough? It just all depends on what schools decide to do. Some schools like Hall County schools and others are doing more about changing behavior in students and teachers and doing training along the way. So it's a great first step, but $45,000 per school system, different school systems need different things.
Kathy.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a ton of money. Folks are going to use it the way they need to use it. I'm glad we're over the discussion of making people carry guns in schools, but hopefully people will find good use for.
We're not over that discussion.
No,
we're not over that discussion. In fact, that could be if you have trained people. It might be good to have someone who carries in a school who had the training, and that could prevent, and it has proven to prevent mass shootings.
If we can have a mental health professional in all of our schools, I think that will help, because a lot of these shootings, these massacres, are students who we go unrecognized with some of the warning signs. We ignore them. And secondly, I've said this, I think we need armed resource officers in all of our schools, particularly in our elementary schools around the state. So if something were to happen, they need to be armed and trained in the schools so they can protect
and we've seen results in areas where we're dealing with mental health, not only with teachers, employees, and students in some of our North Georgia schools where they've implemented a program where they've they've had a radical reduction in violent issues.
And if these parents notice it at home, they need to have someone in the school they can call to say, hey, talk to my child.
I think you're right. I
It's
think you have to
part
have
of
a dual program like that.
Yep.
All right, we're going to move on. Georgia Power customers' energy bills are about to go up again to pay for its 2 nuclear reactors. The Public Service Commission approved the $10.2 billion plan to cover cost overruns for the new reactors at the Vogtle plant near Augusta. The company will pay $2.6 billion. Customers will shoulder $7.5 billion. That amounts to about $9 a month for the average Georgia Power customer. Theron, we've done work with Georgia Power. I want to get your thoughts first on all of this.
Yeah, we got to disclose that. But no, listen, any increase in a power bill, that is a challenge, and I think Georgia Power and Southern Company understands that. But if you just look at what Lauren Bubble McDonald said on the PSC Commission, the Public Service Commission, that this is about investments in the future. And so if you look at where we're going around nuclear, to be a carbon-free state, and the investments, we won't probably see it right away, but 10, 20 years from now, I think that with this decision would be the right thing. And then the good news is that this is the last time that Georgia Power would go before the PSC. Then in 2017, they kind of knew that the $7 billion price tag was going to be there, but ultimately now the PSC has unanimously voted on this, and I think you'll see them continue to communicate with the customers to make sure they can do different things to try to reduce their energy costs.
Phil.
Well, you're making some good points. Nobody likes a rate hike, but I would say that from the figures I've seen, this is clean, safe nuclear power that we need to generate for up to 80 years. And so I think there was a balance here. And I would add that Georgia Power and the Southern Company had to the shareholders had to eat about $3 billion. They wrote that off. So that was kind of the balance of this too.
Kathy, you've been critical.
Yeah, I think the Public Service Commission actually gave them about $3 billion to give to their shareholders, but we'll pick on that another day. I think, what we have to be really clear about is there are no nuclear facilities being built in this country other than this one. And South Carolina canceled theirs after they saw the overruns that we were seeing in this state. So, ratepayers are paying a big bill. I think people should really look at public service commissioners as we go into the next election. By my count, and I'm going to pick a little bit of a nit here, but none of them pay their rates to Georgia Power. They all pay their rates to electrical co-ops around the state. And so they're inflicting 3 increases in price this year on ratepayers to cover overruns on a project that was projected to spend $14 billion in construction, and it's now over $35 billion.
But I was surprised then to see, though, groups like Georgia Watch signed off on this. They were okay with this because this is about the future, the energy, the points that everybody had made.
It is about the future, and it is a kind of energy that we know is going to be clean, that has got better return than wind and solar at this point in time. Not to say wind and solar won't, but it's got a better return. We know it's going to work, and I think we're ahead of the game. South Carolina may have canceled theirs, but they may be sorry about that later because this is the way of the future to keep clean energy out there.
And I would just point out, too, that ever since 3 Mile Island, the federal government has been just switching the rules on nuclear power production, and you had the Westinghouse bankruptcy, which nobody could have foreseen about that. There's no way you could have canceled the project right in the middle of it. They had to go through with it, and it worked out fine.
Well, South Carolina did cancel theirs right in the middle of it, so you could have canceled it right in the middle of it.
That was a huge loss to the taxpayers, too.
Yeah, it was, but we'll see. But let me just, to your point about Georgia Watch, I don't know why they agreed to it, but my guess is they saw the handwriting on the wall, the increases were going to happen, and they negotiated, I would guess, an increase in the amount of assistance that people who are low income would receive. So it was a little bit of a buy-off. But remember, leadership counts. Know who you're voting for.
Yeah, I just think that it's a strong coalition. I mean, again, we can debate how it happened in the overruns. I think Phil makes a good point. No one could foresee the lawsuits and everything that was going on. But ultimately, having you guys worked in Augusta, I mean, the amount of jobs that Plant Vogtle is going to bring to this community and how it's going to continue, I think, make Georgia a leader when it comes to, again, being carbon free. And look at all the growth we're having. You need more electricity, you need more jobs, more affordability. You need more electricity.
All right, we'll leave it there. Up next, Rudy Giuliani files for bankruptcy after being ordered to pay $148 million in a defamation case brought by 2 former Fulton County elections workers. We'll discuss next.
Join the discussion on the Georgia Gang Facebook page and watch past episodes on the Georgia Gang YouTube channel.
Just days after being ordered to pay $148 million to 2 former Fulton County elections workers who sued for defamation, Rudy Giuliani filed for bankruptcy. Martha, what are the chances that Shay Moss and Ruby Freeman get paid the money that they deserve here? In
There
this
was
case?
never a chance they were going to get paid this money, okay? Because
Even a little?
Not even a little. But really, for them, it's the point that he has been disgraced. I mean, he is the saddest story of this whole saga, I believe. He's gone from being this, the America's mayor to being this kind of shadow of himself. And it's a very sad, sad thing. I doubt they're going to get any money, but I don't know that they really thought they were going to get $150 million. He does have, I think, a piece of property he's going to sell, but, it's going to be to all satisfy debt.
Kathy?
Well, I hope in this next case they can, issue a restraining order and make him stop, because he just keeps on perpetuating these, lies about them that, he's already been found guilty of lying. So, the least that we can do for these two women is to make him stop doing this. And I think it's shameful that he's continuing to behave in this way.
All right, you want to move on, or you want to?
No, I just think, listen, and thank you, Martha and Kathy, and I want to thank Martha for what she said, because, a lot of Republicans are, still trying to, support Rudy Giuliani, right? And Martha, definitely reminds us that this was a mayor who was in New York City who was revered right after 9/11. But what he did to these women, and what he continues to do, to your point, Kathy, is just shameful. And to me, they are the real heroes. Let's call their names, Ruby Freeman and Shay Moss, for having the courage to tell the truth and truth to power, and not, sort of let their life be derailed with the threats. I mean, these wives, these women and their families would never be the same because of Rudy Giuliani. And whether he files bankruptcy and all that stuff, more people need to join Martha and others in coming out and just calling it for what it is.
Phil?
Well, I do think this. I think that obviously defamation is wrong, but you do have a right to question elections, and both the right and the left and the middle and everybody else should be doing that. And I think that the video that happened in Fulton County, where no one knew what was happening, we do know one thing: state law was broken when the media and the Republican poll watchers were ordered out, and then the count continued. That was wrong. But people like Giuliani just took it too far.
You're right. Over to Cobb County, where a federal judge has ruled the school board districts are illegal and has now called for new maps to be drawn. The school district immediately appealed to the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals. This is very messy, Martha.
Yeah, it is messy, and I'm not sure if I should comment on it because of being on the State Board of Education. But look, this is kind of where we are right now. I'm a little concerned about the fact that every map going to be challenged now? Have we crossed over this Rubicon where no matter what? Because there should be an acceptance that if elected people that were elected to do the job, that it should be accepted. But we're not in that world right now.
Theron?
You look at Cobb County, I've said this before, and you guys know this. Cobb County used to be the home of one of the most conservative counties in Georgia. I mean, it was where Bob Barr, I think, represented a portion of it. And so to see the flip and the transition to now it being a strong blue county, and this is a 4-3 Republican-controlled school board who the judge says drew maps that clearly, here we go, using this term again, dilutes black voting power. And to me, minority voters should be especially concerned about these efforts to gerrymander these districts for political outcomes that favor the Republicans. And so I think that this judge's ruling will, probably get appealed. But it's, again, another sort of gerrymandering that has been called out by a judge.
Well, it is being appealed, number one, and I think the voters, not judges, should be the ultimate decision here. And we'll just see what happens when it goes to the upper court.
Kathy?
Well, there's something that's really confusing to me in this. The judges dismissed the school district that drew the districts from the case and now says it's the fault of the election board. Election boards have nothing to do with drawing districts.
Correct.
Election boards administer elections and are removed from that political process. And so I don't understand at all what the judge is doing in this particular instance.
And quickly, my problem with it is that we elect people to do these things, and usually the people that are the majority draw to their advantage, whether Democrats are in the majority or whether Republicans are in the majority, and
you can do it for partisan purposes.
Yes.
Well, you could also do it with independent commissions and get out of that business altogether.
I don't believe anybody's independent
before.
anymore.
Don't dilute
All
black
right,
voters.
we'll leave it there, and coming up, winners and losers. Stay tuned.
Time now for the week's winners and losers.
Kathy, we'll start with you.
All right, I'm doing naughty and nice instead of winners and losers. I'm going to start with nice. You know, as you get to the year end, you start thinking about groups you want to support and tax deductions and things like that. And I just want to mention two. Soccer in the Streets is a great program that has soccer for free for kids at MARTA stations around the city of Atlanta, and they're great. And then Lead Atlanta, which runs baseball programs for kids, and they just are expanding into elementary schools now. And check them both out. You can look them up online and send a little love their way. Naughty, Public Service Commission. They just need to go sit in a corner for a while.
They're grounded.
They're grounded.
Phil.
Well, my winner's Christmas time. Whether you're a Christian or not, celebrating the birth of Jesus Christ, it's still a time of joy and fun and hopefully family relaxation and getting together. And secondly, we mentioned the Atlanta Public School superintendent being the Grinch and not accepting that. That's Danielle Battle. She's got to be a loser.
All right, Theron.
I want to make, well, first of all, Merry Christmas to everyone and my family. And then I want to make President Joe Biden a winner this week, who just made thousands of people who were convicted of use of simple possession of marijuana in federal land basically eligible to be pardoned. And I also want to give a shout out to Deputy Andrew Clark, Fulton County Sheriff Deputy, who I ran into, big fan of the show, went to Fort Valley State, HBCU. So thank you for your support.
Martha.
I want to say Merry Christmas to everyone. Very happy about the UGA recruiting class. And thanks to the Georgia Supreme Court for upholding the convictions of the two men that killed our Hall County deputy in 2019.
All right, I'll give a shout out to the Department of Driver Services, the Kennesaw office. They are avid viewers of the Georgia Gang. My daughter now has her license, so everybody pray.
Oh, no.
Making a very Merry Christmas, everyone. We will see you again next week. Bye-bye.